You don't need to go to the end of the world or some exotic land to see strange things. You just need to go to Reddit. Check out how its users share weird and crazy stuff they found in their houses. It's rare when old finds in the house have any value, but this married couple managed to win the jackpot. In Cleveland, Ohio, they started making home repairs. The man was tearing dusty boards from the ceiling in the basement when he noticed something behind bars. It was a small green suitcase. He found the second one in another part of the basement. At first, the husband and wife thought the suitcase contained some old baseball cards, but instead, they found a treasure worth 33,000 pounds. There were old banknotes, and some of them were very rare. They were delighted with this find, but didn't spend money on entertainment. According to the man, they used the cash to pay off their mortgage. These people were even luckier. Several residents of a small English town in North Yorkshire were doing repairs in the house. They discovered one of the largest hoards of 18th century English gold coins ever found in Great Britain. The owners removed a small clay cup the size of a soda can, hidden in the concrete under the floorboards. The bowl's surface was covered with a thin layer of salt, and inside, there were about 260 gold coins. The estimated value of the entire treasure was about $200,000. But it all depends on the auction. Perhaps the amount will reach $500,000. One user came to his mom's new multi-apartment building. He went to the basement and found a huge bank vault there. There was this round, thick metal door leading to the bank safe. He didn't find any money or gold, but the vault was in excellent condition. Of course, other Reddit users found out how this could happen. If a bank goes bankrupt, it takes all its belongings from the building except for a giant safe. The fact is that dismantling such an object requires huge costs. It can't be removed without expensive equipment, so banks leave their safes in the building. Another Reddit user wrote that a law firm bought a closed bank building and turned the vault into an office. They couldn't break through a thick wall in this room to install a window, so they just hung a photo with a window. Another user showed a rather creepy discovery made in the basement of his house. It was a huge hole leading into the darkness and filled with cold liquid. The user didn't panic and measured the pit. It was only 8 feet deep, half filled with ordinary water. He didn't find anything else, no secret room or dungeon. In fact, this was not just a pit, but a particular well called a cistern. And again, thanks to Reddit users for the answer. In the past, people installed such things in many homes to replenish water supplies. Cisterns were popular in dry areas where residents couldn't access a water supply system, or when people were afraid that a river or reservoir was polluted. They collected rainwater and stored it in these wells. To avoid contamination from the surrounding soil, they cemented these pits. People used water for house cleaning, showering, and laundry. You could even install filters in such a tank to drink clean water. This user found something strange not in his house, but in the basement of the office where he worked. In a dark, concrete room, among the junk, he saw a red iron door leading into the unknown. "Keep closed at all times" was written on its cold surface. There were no locks or keyholes on it, only bolts. The user could have easily opened it, but didn't. Would you dare? The thing was actually not scary at all, but it was pretty dangerous. This is transformer storage with a powerful electrical voltage inside. It can explode or catch fire or even electrocute someone. Therefore, it was placed in the basement away from people. No one except electricians is allowed to go there. Someone found a strange tiny room in the attic of their new apartment behind a small iron door. Inside, the user found a small bed, several shelves, and a small window. It seems that someone lived there, but who and why? There's almost no information about this. Imagine that you're walking through an abandoned house and suddenly see a phantom stuck in the wall and trying to escape. One Reddit user photographed an unusual installation in an abandoned house. It looks like a person trying to break out of the wall. Of course, there is no mystery or magic here, just someone's great sculptor skills, but still, it looks pretty creepy. Many users find secret rooms in their homes, and no one knows what those were used for and who lived there. But this guy found the most practical and valuable space. In the backyard of his house, he discovered a shelter from radioactive waste built in the 60s. It looks pretty atmospheric and safe. This user moved into a new house and found this strange white door in the wall. It looked like an area for a water heater or something, but it turned out that the door led to a strange room. It was small but cozy. Someone even put a carpet on the floor. But there was another door with a lock at the back of this room. The user opened the black door and stepped inside another, a much creepier room. The walls and ceiling were covered with soundproof plates and white plastic tarps. Also, he saw 3 to 4 outlets and some kind of pad that looked like a small bed. There was a briefcase on the floor with an old wooden box, envelopes with money from different countries, and 4 small silver bars. But the strangest thing in that place was a black safe. The user opened it and found several VHS cassettes and a white sheet. "Save yourself" was written on it in black ink. The user wanted to share the contents of the tapes on Reddit. Many people thought that all this was fake and didn't believe him. But then another user said he knew the previous owner of the house. It was just an ordinary guy. Then the user posted the contents of the tapes. The recordings were quite unsettling. Someone suggested that all this was a promo campaign for some horror movie. But then the same user admitted that it was all a hoax that had gone out of control and become viral. He wrote a post where he described in detail how he created it, but the site administration deleted it. Let's finish our list with the most unusual apartment. Imagine that you're walking through a residential Parisian neighborhood and entering a multi-story building where ordinary people live. You go up the stairs and stop near an old door. You press the handle down and go inside. It seems to you that you're in a horror movie about ghosts. Cabinets, chairs, all the furniture here is made at the beginning of the last century. All the rooms look like an old antique store. Everything is covered with a thick layer of dust and cobwebs. There are sinister-looking dolls and stuffed toys on the floor, but nothing strange happened here. The owner left this place in the 40s. She left everything as it was. She moved to live somewhere else and didn't tell anyone about the apartment. Why she didn't come back is also unknown. The apartment has been in this condition for 70 years. The owner's relatives hired appraisers to estimate the cost of the apartment. In 2010, they went to this place, opened the door, and found a painting by Italian artist Giovanni Boldini, which he created in the 19th century. This painting was sold for $2.5 million.
It was September 7, 1695, somewhere at sea near the Horn of Africa. A merchant ship laden with treasure was sailing from present-day Yemen to its home port in India. Its escort had previously been captured by pirates, and now it was their turn, as they spotted a frigate approaching them fast. From its mast pole, a red flag with a Jolly Roger on it fluttered in the wind. Once the battle was over, a British pirate named Henry Avery sailed away with one of the biggest catches ever. It all happened during the golden age of piracy, from 1690 to 1730. At that time, all ships sailing across the Atlantic Ocean feared the European pirates, and you could hear "Arr, matey" in taverns on several continents. From the coast of North America all the way to South America, they would engage merchant vessels and steal their cargo. The Caribbean was a real hotspot for piracy. Do the names Blackbeard and Captain Kidd sound familiar to you? Or is it just me who read too many pirate stories? Anyway, as the 17th century drew to a close, the thirst for wealth made some pirates sail down the eastern coast of Africa and into the Indian Ocean. This is how Avery ended up so far in the east, but he was not the only European to sail in that direction. At the time, the Indian Ocean was teeming with merchant ships, as convoys transported luxury goods or pilgrims from Mecca in the Arabian Peninsula to the Mughal Empire in what is today India. The rich cargo included silk, spices, incense, and perfumes. In addition to these goods, the East India Company transported everything from cash to jewels on behalf of several European empires, such as England, Netherlands, and France. Sounds pretty much like any pirate's dream, doesn't it? The most attractive targets were ships that belonged to the Mughal Emperor, whose impressive realm covered nearly the entire Indian subcontinent. Back in the Caribbean, cloth, timber, and spirits were the most common types of cargo. It didn't seem good enough to the most ambitious pirates. They set their minds on more luxurious catch, gold, gems, and silver they could get in the Indian Ocean. Adam Baldridge, who was a wanted man in British-ruled Jamaica because he took a man's life, was among the first to arrive. Through not-so-honest means, in 1691, he managed to establish a safe haven for pirates on St. Mary's Island, near the remote northern coast of Madagascar, 250 miles off the African mainland. The place sat close to major shipping routes between Europe and Asia. Talk about an ideal location. The pirates made sure to fortify the island. As you can guess, they didn't like unexpected guests and enjoyed staying there, having fun in safety. A Frenchman, Olivier Levasseur, and his English colleague, John Taylor, were among the most successful of those islanders. In 1721, they easily captured a Portuguese treasure ship. It didn't go so smoothly, though. A serious storm damaged the ship, so they had to dock at the island of Reunion for repairs. There were important individuals aboard, such as the Viceroy of Portuguese India and the Bishop of Goa. But the loot was the pirate duo's biggest feat. Cash, diamonds, and porcelain worth hundreds of millions of US dollars in today's money. The catch was so enormous that the pirates didn't even bother to rob the rich passengers. But even this heist couldn't overshadow what Henry Ivory had achieved 26 years earlier. We don't know a lot about the life of this Englishman, except that he was born in Plymouth and that he served in the Merchant Marine. In 1694, Ivory became the first mate aboard Charles II, a privateering ship hired by the Spanish crown. Such ships were privately owned and engaged by nations during major conflicts with other nations. Ivory's ship had an important mission of tracking French smugglers in the Caribbean, but soon the tables would turn. Ivory was good with words and led a successful mutiny in 1694. After he left the unfortunate captain ashore and renamed the ship Fancy, the new captain set sail for Madagascar. There, news reached Ivory that a large fleet of 25 ships was soon to leave for its home in India. Apart from pilgrims, the fleet included several treasure ships owned by the Grand Mughal of India himself. Ivory didn't waste time and assembled an armada of 6 ships to go after the Mughal convoy. As soon as they spotted the fleet, the pirates started a chase. They managed to board an escort vessel, stealing gold and silver worth more than $17 million in today's money. And if that wasn't enough, Ivory and his men went after the flagship named Ganjai Savai. It was the biggest ship in all of India at the time that could protect itself better than the whole fleet combined. The pirates got lucky, as one of their volleys cut the main mast of the Indian ship in half, and there was more serious damage to it. Ivory brought his ship alongside the crippled Mogul ship, and his men boarded the vessel. Indian sailors showed some impressive resistance, even though their captain had abandoned them. Ivory's men won in the end, and they got one of the richest pirate catches ever. They filled their chests with hundreds of thousands of pounds in jewels, gold, and silver. After it, the pirates set course for the Bahamas and used their enormous wealth to convince the local ruler to let them come ashore. Their most prized possession, their ship, the Fancy, was included in that deal. Once the news of the heist reached the Emperor of India, a huge diplomatic scandal broke out. The Grand Mogul was enraged and accused the East India Company of plotting against him, arresting several of their high-ranking officials. The company feared that the Indian leader would cancel their valuable trade agreements, so they decided to do something nice for him and bring to justice the pirates responsible for the theft. Together with British ships equipped for search at sea, they launched one of the first truly international pursuit of Ivory and his shipmates, promising a reward to whoever captured him. The pursuit was only partially successful, as they only managed to catch and trial several pirates. Most of them scattered across Europe and the Americas, keeping their share of the wealth. Ivory earned himself the nickname the King of Pirates because of his adventure in the Indian Ocean. Historians believe he escaped to Ireland with his share of the loot using a false name, George Washington. No, I made that up. Piracy was a risky trade, and not all European fortune seekers were successful in the East. Take Dutch pirate Dirk Schijvers, who entrapped 4 ships in the Indian port of Calicut. He demanded money from the local Indian authorities and the East India Company, but they offered him only half of the requested sum. Finally, they settled on a different amount. When it didn't arrive, Schijvers set another ship ablaze. By this point, both the British and the Indians had had enough, and they hired 10 Indian pirate ships to drive Schijvers away, which they succeeded in doing. The pirate captain was forced to return for repairs to St. Mary's Island empty-handed. Oh well. The end of the 18th century and an increased European presence in the region brought about the end of the golden age of piracy. As the British authorities increased raids on pirate strongholds, the number of pirates decreased significantly. In 1692, a huge earthquake that was followed by a tsunami erased a well-known pirate haven from the map, Port Royal in Jamaica. But piracy in the Indian Ocean never fully disappeared. Modern pirates might not have an eye patch or a parrot on their shoulder, but they mean business just as the pirates from the past. The Strait of Malacca connects the Indian Ocean to the Pacific, and today, around 40% of world trade takes place through it. Despite this fact, piracy was alive and well here even in the 21st century. The national authorities of Malaysia and Indonesia, two countries the strait separates, were finally able to curb piracy only in 2016. No, it's not a romantic story at all. If you walk through this small stone doorway in Hierapolis, Turkey, you might never come back alive. Back in ancient times, people thought it was some sort of portal to the underworld. Romans would go in carrying perfectly healthy bulls, but after a few minutes, they would watch these animals collapse as if hit by some mysterious force. But what's even weirder is that nothing happened to people. They could walk in and out just fine. Now, recent studies might have an answer for these eerie happenings, and it all has to do with people's heights. The gate, known as Plutonium, named after Pluto, the deity of the underworld, is a stone doorway leading to a small 32-square-foot cave. But the real danger is what is going on beneath it. Hierapolis is a super active geological area, and there's a big crack under the city that constantly emits volcanic carbon dioxide, which comes up as a visible mist. During the day, the sun dissipates the gas. At night, the gas forms some kind of a carbon dioxide lake on the sheltered arena floor. At dawn, you need to get out of there before it's too late. This whole place can turn particularly life-threatening right before the sun rises, when the carbon dioxide concentration, about 15 inches above the arena floor, reaches 35%. That means birds, bulls, and even humans can suffocate and pass away in just a couple of minutes. But there is a scientific reason that explains how Romans could get out of there unharmed. The carbon dioxide concentration drops quickly with height, so animals perished while their handlers, being taller and standing up, could walk out and breathe safely. Most people can't stay inside the Begarn fort after sunset. This 16th century fort, located about 146 miles from Delhi, is known as one of the most haunted places in India. During the day, the area is bustling with visitors who can walk through the main gate of this once grand fort city and check out the ruins of temples and palaces. But they will also see this big sign at the gate that dramatically warns everybody that all access is strictly forbidden after dark. That's probably because at night, according to locals, women can be heard screaming and crying in that place, along with the sounds of bangles breaking and strange music. Others have reported seeing shadowy figures and flashing lights among the ruins, or even smelling a strange perfume floating around. Yawata no Yabushirasu is one of Japan's most restricted forests, located in Ichikawa. The forest itself is a small area, covering just a little more than 40 square yards, and it is mostly a thick patch of mosu bamboo. Its location next to a parking lot and modern buildings makes it seem less intimidating, but don't be mistaken by its appearance. Since at least the 19th century, people have said that anyone who enters this forest is bound to disappear and never be seen again. So, as soon as you arrive, a sign near the forest tells you about its history and the curse believed to be linked to it. Some rumors suggest the creepy presence of an ancient samurai lord walking around. Other legends say that the forest hides a bottomless pit filled with poisonous gas. Whether these stories are true or not, today, the area is enclosed by stone walls, and entry is still strictly prohibited. In a valley called the Dark Entry Forest in Connecticut, you will find Dudleytown, but you definitely shouldn't go inside. Not only has the land been private property since the 1920s, but it is also known as one of the spookiest places on Earth. This place was first settled in the early 1740s, and many of the original settlers were from the Dudley family. That's why it's called Dudley Town. There's a local rumor that the town's founders were descended from Edmund Dudley, an English nobleman who lost his life for treason. The legend says this curse followed the Dudley family all the way across the Atlantic to America, and their misfortune is said to be responsible for crop failures, mental problems, and several tragic incidents in the village. Again, it is all just rumors, since historians haven't found any real evidence to support these claims. Still, the pitch-black surroundings and the eerie Blair Witch Project vibe going on in that place fueled ghost stories in the 1980s. This led to many cases of vandalism in the following decade, and because of that, the landowners closed the area to the public. This old abandoned building used to be the fancy palace of King Farouk's family, who was the penultimate king of Egypt back in 1936. After his family members passed away, the palace was turned into a morgue. Locals say that today, the whole place is super creepy and off-limits. Some people have reported seeing light bulbs flicker and shadows move around, making strange noises. Once, a group of kids allegedly went inside and totally freaked out when they found all the doors had suddenly disappeared, leaving them in complete darkness. They had no choice but to start screaming for help. This Hawaiian island has been off-limits to people for over a century. It's called Ni'iau and is the smallest inhabited island in Hawaii, covering around 69.5 square miles. It has around 84 residents. The island doesn't have cell phone service, paved roads, or power lines, just solar panels for electricity. A single family has privately owned the island since 1864, when a Scottish farmer bought it for $10,000, which would be around $250,000 today. The island has stayed in the family, passing down to its descendants, the Robinsons. They have kept it private ever since, so access is highly restricted and basically by invitation only. The Erdstall tunnels are a network of about 2,000 mysterious underground passageways mainly found in Central Europe, especially in Austria and Bavaria. These tunnels are usually narrow and cramped, often just wide enough for one person to squeeze through at a time, and they are believed to date back to the Middle Ages, as far back as the 12th century. What's really puzzling about these tunnels is their purpose. Despite a lot of research, nobody really knows why they were built. There is a theory that they were used for storage, but since many of them are below the water line and occasionally get filled with water, that doesn't seem very practical. These tunnels have very light, almost claustrophobic sections and sudden drops, which doesn't seem practical for other straightforward uses like escape routes, hiding places, or even spiritual purposes. To make things even more mysterious, there is a complete lack of artifacts, which makes it even harder for researchers to figure out what these tunnels were really for. Since 2019, adventurous people can get arrested if they try to climb this rock. Uluru, also known as Ayers Rock, has been off-limits because it is now considered a sacred site for local communities. But the fact that it is also extremely dangerous probably played a big role in the decision to close it off to visitors. This rock is 1,142 feet high, which is about the height of an 80-story building. The climb to the summit can be very slippery, and high temperatures, which can hit 116 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer, have led to people passing away from dehydration and heat-related issues. Something even creepier happens at the top of the rock right after storms. When it rains, small tadpole-like crustaceans called shield shrimp hatch in temporary waterholes and rock pools on top of Uluru. These extraterrestrial-looking creatures are about 3 inches long, and they spread their super-resilient eggs everywhere. When enough summer rain comes, they hatch and go wild, feeding on microorganisms and bacteria in the water. How these strange creatures end up in the fleeting pools on top of Uluru is still unclear, but the most likely explanation is that their eggs might travel there with the wind. So looky here, scientists discovered ancient artifacts near King Tut's tomb. Turns out, his VIP final resting place looks more like a public graveyard with about a dozen wooden coffins that's been there for around 3,600 years. Okay, I might have exaggerated a tad. The 11 tombs weren't exactly right next to King Tut, but they were close, near the same city of Luxor. New findings in Egyptian tombs can help us piece together what life was like in ancient Egypt. And guess what? Ancient Egyptians seem to have been remarkably like us, modern humans. Say, the women have always loved jewelry, and archaeologists retrieved a beautifully made necklace with 30 amethyst beads and 2 agate beads, plus a hippo head amulet. Bet it was all the rage back then. Researchers also discovered 2 copper mirrors. One had a handle shaped like a lotus, and the other was decorated with Hathor, the ancient Egyptian deity of the sky, women, fertility, and love. These recent excavations near Tutankhamun's burial site led to another jaw-dropping revelation. For the first time in thousands of years, fragments of Queen Hatshepsut's Valley Temple were uncovered. This fearless woman was thought to be the second female pharaoh, who ruled with both courage and wisdom, leaving a legacy as solid as the stones themselves. Her temple, hidden for ages, opens a window into a time filled with power, intrigue, and spiritual devotion. Archaeologists found over 1,000 beautifully decorated stone blocks on the outskirts of Hatshepsut's funerary temple. There were very few women who managed to take the throne in ancient Egypt. Another tomb was found nearby, and it belonged to the overseer of Queen Teti Sheri's palace, whose name was Jehuti-Mez. Queen Hatshepsut seems to have even more tombs, aces up her sleeve. These tombs were carved into the rock instead of being built as pyramids, showing a unique ancient perspective on how to protect the soul in the afterlife. Experts managed to retrieve some cool ancient pieces from the site. Toys made of clay, mummy masks, winged scarabs, and some amulets. Sadly, there surely used to be way more artifacts, but over the last centuries, there have been people other than archaeologists to stumble upon this site. It's likely that looters got to these tombs before them and may have taken some valuable items. But they did leave behind some cool stuff for the researchers, like pottery used for offerings of bread and meat, along with archers' bows that connect the tomb's owners to the Egyptian military. Meanwhile, soul protection is way more important than you might think, especially if you're roaming around Luxor looking for ancient secrets. You aren't scared of King Tut's curse, are you? Let me tell you what happened to those who weren't scared, but promise me to take it with a dash of salt, okay? For years, Egyptologists, especially those who believed in paranormal activity, were convinced that there was an unsettling curse surrounding Tutankhamun's archaeological discoveries. This belief stemmed from the mysterious and untimely demise of several excavators who discovered the tomb in 1922 with no logical explanation for why they passed away. It was just easier to chalk it up to something supernatural and avoid the whole mess. But it turns out it wasn't a curse at all. It was likely the radiation that caused those excavators to perish. Now, you might wonder where the radiation came from. After all, while radioactivity was discovered in the 19th century, ancient Egyptians, despite their impressive pyramids, didn't have any radium lying around to make Tut's tomb glow like crazy. So, what could be the real story? It might have been toxic waste behind it all. Toxic levels of radiation from uranium and hazardous waste have been lurking inside the tomb since it was sealed over 3,000 years ago. The burial chamber of Tutankhamun's tomb reportedly has such high radiation levels that anyone who steps inside could easily end up with a fatal dose of radiation sickness or an incurable condition. By the way, you can have a somewhat similar level of radioactivity if you don't get rid of those moldy dinner leftovers you left to perish in your fridge a month ago. But this radioactivity isn't exclusive to Tutankhamun's tomb. Ancient Egyptian artifacts discovery is rewarding yet dangerous due to unusually high radiation levels in Old Kingdom tombs all over Egypt. Geiger counters have detected radiation at 2 sites near the Giza pyramids, and radon, a radioactive gas, has been found in several underground tombs in Saqqara. Interestingly, experts believe that the builders of these ancient tombs were aware of the toxins, as some eerie warnings were carved into the walls of many tombs. One inscription ominously declared, "They that break this tomb shall meet their end by a malady that no doctor can diagnose." Other ominous phrases like "forbidden," "due to evil spirits," only added to the fear that supernatural curses haunted these ancient sites. Ominous signs have stunned archaeologists since forever, but the fear grew even stronger a century ago with the mysterious passing of Lord Carnarvon, who funded King Tut's excavation in 1922 and reportedly explored the treasure-filled rooms, along with several others who entered the tomb. Arthur Weigall, another British Egyptologist who was present at the tomb's opening and is credited with starting the curse myth, passed away young when he was just in his 50s in 1934. Chances are the condition that made him pass was connected to radiation. In total, 6 out of the 26 people who were there when the tomb was opened met their end within a decade from various causes. Not only X-ray exposure, those reasons include asphyxia, stroke, heart failure, pneumonia, and even poisoning. Well, isn't this getting a little grim? There was one guy who opened the tomb and somehow managed to avoid the infamous curse, Howard Carter, or so it seemed. Some folks pointed to his survival as proof that the curse wasn't real. After digging up the tomb, Carter published several books on the topic and shifted gears from archaeology to dealing in antiquities for various museums. Despite dodging demise or injury, rumors swirled about how the curse may have impacted him in other ways. One of the big stories linked him to Lord Carnarvon's daughter, Evelyn. Some said he was madly in love with her, but she married someone else, so he chose to stay single. Others claimed they had an affair while she was in Egypt, which ended when her father passed away and she left the country for good. However, there wasn't much evidence to support these stories. Evelyn was just 6 when they met, and they remained friends until his last breath. She was even one of the few attendees at his funeral, but denied any romantic involvement, saying they weren't that close. A year after the revolutionary discovery near King Tut's tomb, Evelyn married politician Sir Brograve Beauchamp and had a daughter. That same year, Beauchamp toured the tomb with his parents, guided by Carter himself. Carter never married and, aside from those posthumous rumors about Evelyn, had no other romantic connections. While the curse adds an intriguing twist to his life story, his tendency to keep relationships at arm's length was evident long before the tomb was opened. It seemed Carter just wasn't a people person. In 1939, after battling a serious illness, he ultimately succumbed to fate. He was 64, which was a pretty common life expectancy in the UK back then, so no one really thought it was off and linked it to an ancient curse. When he passed, it turned out he had several artifacts from Tutankhamun's tomb in his London apartment, which were eventually sent back to Egypt, marking what some viewed as the curse's end. Who knows? Maybe if he hadn't had all those ancient souvenirs at his place, he would have lived way longer. But all the other demises might seem off. The curse theory was likely fueled by some strange events during the excavation. Carnarvon got a mosquito bite that became severely infected, and around the time they opened the tomb, Cairo experienced a bizarre power outage and a freak sandstorm. Back in England, the Earl's dog, Susie, managed to escape from Carnarvon's house and began barking frantically at seemingly nothing. At least that's what the staff and family saw. Strangely enough, at the very moment her owner's heart stopped, Susie started howling and fell down without showing any signs of life. Maybe radiation didn't play a crucial role after all, and those were indeed ancient artifacts from King Tut's tomb that made them all perish. Spooky, huh? Stonehenge took approximately 20 million man-hours to build. For comparison, an average human doesn't live much over 700,000 hours. This is Jack, one of the first builders of Stonehenge. Let's say Jack lived to be 80 years old, which is extremely improbable, but it makes it easier for me to crunch the numbers, thanks. If Jack had spent his entire life, from age 0 to age 80, working on the Stonehenge project, it would have required approximately 28.5 generations of people doing the same thing to complete it. That's next to impossible. To make it more plausible, let's multiply that by 2. After all, Jack wouldn't want to dedicate his entire life to moving stones, and he didn't live to be that old. Thus, we arrive at around 57 generations needed to build Stonehenge. That's not enough room on the screen for me to introduce John. Jack's great, you get the drift, grandson. So it all began around 5,000 years ago with just a simple circular earthen bank and ditch. Fast forward to around 26,000 BCE, and the builders replaced that initial structure with a complex arrangement of wooden posts and brought in around 80 dolerite bloom stones from Wales, which were rearranged at least 3 times. Then, a few hundred years later, they added those massive sarsen stones, each weighing around 25 tons. These enormous sandstone blocks were transported about 19 miles to create a continuous outer circle, with 5 trilithons, 2 upright stones topped with a lintel, forming a horseshoe shape inside. It was a millennium-long building process that demanded years of hard work. So, people must have lived nearby, right? But how would they have found shelter back then? Today, we have houses for builders on site, small accommodations that serve as temporary housing. But structures like this definitely didn't exist when Stonehenge was constructed. Did they? Well, actually, they existed. And some recent archaeological digs near Stonehenge prove it. Archaeologists found this Stone Age eco-home, which is a huge deal since it's one of the earliest settlements in the area. This newly uncovered Mesolithic home dates back to around the year 4300 BCE. Let's take a closer look at this house, shall we? Now, for the walls, people back then used a large fallen tree, its trunk to be more precise. These wooden walls were reinforced with flint, and they even lined the pit left by the uprooted tree with cobblestones. To create the roof, they opted for animal hides, which sounds like a wise choice. They must have provided protection against the unpredictable weather of the British Isles. Now, you might be wondering, the weather in Britain is indeed unpredictable, and it has been that way since time immemorial. So, how did the builders manage throughout most of the year, particularly during the winter months? Well, the answer is simple. There was a hearth on site, which isn't surprising, but the system they employed was quite ingenious. A hearth inside the house would have posed too great a risk, yet bringing hot stones into the dwelling was perfectly safe. While they were hot, they couldn't ignite the building. So they used these stones from the hearth as a heat storage system to keep warm at night. And as a final touch, they even incorporated various stones for decoration. They didn't exactly get a Pinterest house, but it added a touch of elegance for sure. And if you think this discovery is merely about the houses, think again. It significantly changes our understanding of how people lived during that time. This discovery places them in an important prehistoric setting right at the start of the Neolithic area, sparking some interesting questions about whether these early folks could be related to the people who built Stonehenge. But there's a big worry. Experts are concerned that this significant find, along with other buried archaeological sites, could be at risk if the authorities go ahead with plans to build a tunnel to reroute the A303 away from the World Heritage Site. Sure thing the house the scientists found wasn't in perfect shape, and it lacked some crucial elements people use for living. Some of them decayed over time, while others were simply absent. So the scientists took 20 tons of chalk, 5,000 hazel rods, and 3 tons of straw, and used all this to recreate the 4,500-year-old design houses. These new buildings are located close to Stonehenge, which is incredible since in this area, planning permission for even a new cowshed is problematic. So, what are these houses like? Well, first off, there are 4 of them, and they're oval-shaped. They're built on the foundation of real houses that stood there about 4,500 years ago, just around the time the Stonehenge Eco House was going up. The houses aren't very big, they're single-room structures. When it comes to dimensions, it was straightforward to estimate since we could gauge the size of the roof and the height of the walls based on the foundations. Each side measures about 16 feet. However, the roof structure remains a bit of a mystery. There were a few differing thatching techniques back then, so pinpointing the exact method used for these dwellings is kind of a guessing game. For now, we think it involves knotted or tied straw carefully secured onto a hazel-woven frame. When fires are lit, the smoke from the hearth wafts up through the thatched roof. Now, remember those 20 tons of chalk? That was needed for the floors and walls. The white chalk walls and floors reflect sunlight and capture heat from the fire. But here's the kicker. The builders encountered a challenge because the ground was so waterlogged that some of the chalk floors took weeks to dry out. By the time they should have been bone dry, they were still as sticky as chewing gum. Now it's safe to say people 4,500 years ago faced similar struggles, and we can really appreciate what they went through while building their homes. The final layer of daub was applied using rags, giving a smooth, almost shiny finish that looks surprisingly classy. The interiors are furnished with wooden and wicker beds and shelves, along with clay pots and jars, all centered around a cozy hearth. The spaces feel surprisingly roomy and are filled with light that streams in through the thatched roof, bouncing off those white walls. Plus, the woven furniture adds a nice touch of authenticity to the vibe. The fires have been lit, and the first meal, bread crafted from flour ground on a stone mill next to the hearth, has been prepared. Those who tried the bread were pleasantly surprised by its flavor, finding it quite tasty. Now, here comes the bummer. Those who recreated the houses did cheat a little. While the materials used were authentic, the tools weren't. They used cement mixers to mix the daub, wheelbarrows to transport the timber, and logs by the hearth were split with steel axes instead of stone ones. Still, the builders aren't professionals, they're volunteers. So I think a bit of cheating is totally cool in this case. There are other volunteers on site who are more than happy to chat about the daily activities of the Stonehenge builders, from grinding grain with a quern to making rope from rushes. But these houses and the Eco House aren't the only remarkable things in the Stonehenge area. Some years ago, archaeologists uncovered a burial site close to Stonehenge that predates the monument itself. This Neolithic long barrow, dating back approximately 56 to 5,700 years, likely contains the remains of some of Britain's earliest inhabitants. The burial site was identified through aerial images that revealed its distinct shape beneath the crops. Salisbury Plain is rich with ancient sites, including Stonehenge, various mounds, and monuments. The area has remained undisturbed over the centuries, which is likely why so many ancient structures are still intact. This discovery also shows a significant shift in human lifestyle during that era, marking a transition from a nomadic existence to settled farming and animal husbandry, much like the Eco House itself. The long barrow in question measures about 85 feet long and 65 feet wide, though much of its above-ground structure has been lost to farming over the years. If this site is like others in the vicinity, it contains the remains of 30 to 50 individuals, along with cow skulls, which were significant to those early communities. Archaeologists have been studying Petra in Jordan for 200 years, and in 2024, they found something they had never seen before. It's a tomb with at least 12 complete human skeletons and artifacts that are over 2,000 years old right in front of the treasury. Bronze, iron, and ceramic items were placed with the deceased, which shows how people honored their loved ones when they passed away. It's a rare chance for scientists to learn more about the Nabateans, an ancient group of Arabian nomads who built Petra. The objects found in the tomb under Petra's treasury are in amazing condition, but the skeletons became fragile because it's damp inside the tomb. They plan to study the remains and extract DNA to see if the people in the tomb were related. While some scientists are solving tomb mysteries, others have trained AI to find new ancient sites for them. They've created an algorithm that works with a special type of satellite imagery. This technique uses radio waves that can peek under things like sand, soil, and even ice to find hidden objects. AI will help search a huge desert on the Arabian Peninsula called the Empty Quarter for archaeological treasures. The lead scientists of the experiment trained the algorithm to recognize hidden locations using data from a site they had found before. The new tech can discover buried structures within 20 inches, which is very precise. Another groundbreaking tech, LiDAR, which means light detection and ranging, helped archaeologists reveal new hidden cities all around the world. LiDAR can see big structures beneath layers of vegetation and map even subtle changes in ancient landscapes. They use it to scan large areas from a small plane flying over places that aren't so easy to study from the ground, like dense jungle. In 2024 alone, They found new Maya settlements in southern Mexico, gardens, roads, and rivers in Ecuador's Amazon rainforest, ancient ruins on the Pacific island of Tonga, and the remains of 2 medieval cities along the Silk Road route in Uzbekistan. Maybe some smart technology can also explain what Marge Simpson is doing on Earth in an ancient Egyptian tomb from 3,000 years ago. The drawing, featuring a woman with yellow-colored skin, a blue crown, and a green outfit, is alarmingly like the famous cartoon character. If you don't see a resemblance here, I hope you'll at least enjoy an amazingly well-preserved necklace with amethyst and agate beads. It's from another recent find from Egypt, an ancient tomb with 11 sealed burials near Luxor. Archaeologists also found 2 copper mirrors, one with a lotus-shaped handle and the second with a unique design of the deity of the sky, women, fertility, and love in ancient Egypt. The hair of the figurine was originally made from almost 4,000 mud beads. Another awesome find from 2024 is an ancient Greek shrine with intact burials, a sarcophagus, and plenty of gold inside. They think it was built before the year 300 before the Common Era, and the marble lions, also found inside, were made from the same marble as the Parthenon in Athens. Greece is so full of ancient treasures that the city of Thessaloniki will house around 300,000 of those artifacts in their new subway system. Meanwhile, archaeologists in France have found a monument unlike any other, and they can't figure out what it was used for. It's direct proof that people used to live here between the Neolithic and the early Iron Age periods. The coolest part is a monument made of 3 unique shapes that fit together like puzzle pieces. Some gravel found in the monument could mean there used to be a wooden fence called a palisade. People who built it probably used it for protection or decoration. The team studied the layers of soil around the monument to learn more about its origins. The only tools found so far were sharp flint stones, not the cartoon characters, which were used during the Neolithic period. The next step will be radiocarbon dating to figure out exactly how old the site is. Now, the oldest saddle ever found so far was found in the grave of a woman near the edge of the Taklamakan Desert in northwest China. This saddle is the oldest ever discovered. It was crafted from pieces of leather that were sewn together and stuffed with straw and animal hair to make it soft. Now, normally, things made from natural materials like this don't last very long because they rot or fall apart. But the Taklamakan Desert is so dry that it helped preserve the artifact. The herdswoman who used the saddle was buried in her full riding attire, so this proves that not only men used saddles and took part in herding and traveling. Now let's shift to Guatemala, where an ornate jade mask made by the ancient Maya people was waiting for centuries to be discovered. Scientists use radiocarbon dating to figure out the age of the mask. They believe the mask may represent a Maya storm deity, a powerful figure in their mythology. These kinds of masks were often made to honor Maya royalty, and they were placed in the tombs of kings and queens when they were buried. The king's tomb was also decorated with carvings made using tools crafted from volcanic obsidian. After 15 years of searching, scientists may have finally figured out where the altar stone of Stonehenge comes from. They compared the tiny minerals inside the altar stone with rocks from many places in Wales and England and ruled out lots of spots. Then they found the perfect match with a place in Scotland, more than 466 miles away from Stonehenge. This area might even be Orkney, a group of islands in the far northeast of Scotland where a lot was going on during the Neolithic period. The big question now is how ancient people moved such a massive stone so far. The altar stone is over 16 feet long and weighs more than 6 tons. The new theory is that they might have used boats to carry it across the coastline and rivers. Once it was close to Stonehenge, they theoretically dragged it across the land using wooden sleds, ropes, and a lot of teamwork. Meanwhile, in the north of France, an ancient home popped to the surface during the construction of a new house. It turned out to be a luxury urban house for the elite from the 2nd century of the Common Era. The inside of the house was destroyed by a fire, but under the destroyed layer, there are beautiful real-size fresco paintings. Turkish archaeologists unearthed the arm and foot bones of elephants that lived around 9 million years ago. They also found fossils of early horses, giraffes, and even saber-toothed cats. They've already identified 43 distinct types of animals from this site and collected more than 4,000 fossils. One more cool find from Turkey is a 64,000-year-old workshop inside Incatia Cave. It looks like people used it for 24,000 years non-stop. There are some tools inside, like flakes and blades, which were made inside the workshop. In eastern Turkey, a farmer accidentally found a 1,000-square-foot mosaic from the late Roman or early Byzantine period just beneath the dirt. Experts say it's a one-of-a-kind thing from this region, and is still in one piece after all this time. The pattern shows dozens of trees, plants, and animals that were found in ancient Turkey. There could be more treasures in the area, so they plan to keep digging. Our final stop will be in Sicily, where archaeologists uncovered a huge ancient thermal complex. Inside, they found 2 rooms with floors covered in colorful mosaic designs, along with a large courtyard surrounded by arched wings. As they kept digging, they discovered more parts of the ancient city. They found new roads and the remains of a huge complex, along with stretches of old stone walls that were part of the city's fortifications. These discoveries are helping scientists imagine what the city might have looked like during ancient times. No one knows for sure whether the bathhouse was built by the Greeks or the Romans, since both civilizations lived in Sicily long ago. If you're looking for the coolest accommodation in Paris, you may consider an apartment inside the Eiffel Tower. When Gustave Eiffel was designing his most famous construction, he added a private apartment for himself right at the top. It's rather spacious, especially for Paris, where people often live in apartments 10 times smaller. It had a workshop, living space, a dining room, a kitchen, a bathroom, and piano. But there was no bedroom, so it's likely that no one ever slept there. No one lives there now, except for the mannequins of Eiffel himself, his daughter, and one of Thomas Edison. Members of the scientific community chosen by Eiffel and other notable guests were allowed to visit the property, and Edison was one of the chosen ones. Now, across the pond, the New York Public Library also hosts secret apartments for the staff. These apartments used to be a normal thing in different library buildings across the city, but now there are only 13 left out of 30. One superintendent lived in the library on 42nd Street for many years, and his own daughter was even born inside that building. The apartments came in different sizes, and some had up to 8 rooms. By 2006, the last resident custodian retired, and now these apartments are used for other library needs. It's known as the tallest building in the world, but Burj Khalifa is actually not one, but several constructions connected into one. It has a Y-shaped plan, and if you look at it from above, it's scary. I mean, it resembles a spider lily. It's uber flexible and can bend a little bit when there are strong winds or even earthquakes, so it stands safe and strong. Burj Khalifa has over 24,000 windows, and it takes a crew of 36 people around 3 months to clean them all. There's a crypt beneath the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., and visitors pass through it every day. The first architect of this famous landmark designed it as a grand vestibule, which means just a big entrance hall. Several years later, plans changed, and the room was supposed to become the final resting place for George Washington and his wife Martha. She agreed to it, and architects changed the Capitol plans to add a tomb below the famous rotunda. They also planned to put a statue of Washington on top, and there was going to be a 10-foot hole in the ceiling so people could look down and see his tomb from the rotunda. But Congress couldn't agree on all the details of this memorial, and the tomb remained empty. Years later, workers closed the big hole in the floor, which was meant to give light to the tomb because cold air was leaking into the rotunda. At some point, the crypt was used for bicycle parking. Today, it has statues of famous people from the 13 original colonies, and George Washington and his wife are buried out back. No, actually, they're in Mount Vernon. There's a hidden clock and a calendar in St. Peter's Square in the Vatican. The 83-foot obelisk works like a giant sundial, using its shadow to show the time and even mark special days like the solstices. When the sun is at its highest point in the sky, called solar noon, the shadow of the obelisk falls on a line of stones on the ground. On the winter solstice, the shadow reaches its farthest point. On the summer solstice, the shadow is much shorter. There are also 5 other special markers that show when the sun enters different zodiac signs. The long, thin granite line running from the obelisk toward the Pope's window shows exactly when it's noon. British seaside Brighton stands on top of a secret network of underground tunnels, with Victorian sewer systems and a hidden road. They say the tunnels were built below the royal pavilion, so that King George IV could go on, secret dates. History experts say it's not true, and the king actually used tunnels to keep his servants out of sight when they moved between the pavilion and the stables. The 30 miles of tunnels are now over 150 years old, and you can see some of them with an organized tour. But some parts of them are still in use. One tunnel serves as an emergency relief valve for heavy rain. Another tunnel has a shooting range inside. The bascule chambers inside the Tower Bridge are one of the coolest hidden spaces in London. These spacious rooms were built as an operational center to let the bridge's huge counterweights move for the bridge to open. They were the final stage in the construction of the bridge. Now, if you're lucky, you can see these chambers on a special behind-the-scenes tour of the bridge. You'd have to descend 115 steps below water level until you get into the cold and damp space with rumbling overhead. Sometimes they organize concerts here, and the acoustics are just perfect. In the early 1930s, there was a real race in New York to construct the tallest building. Once 40 Wall Street was finished, it won the title. But then, the architect of the Chrysler Building added a spire to its top, and it became the new champion. The spire was waiting all this time inside the top of the building. Workers had to carefully lift each section of it and assemble it on top. They used nearly 4 million bricks to finish the whole building and laid them all out by hand. There were also some elements from Chrysler's automotive empire, like hubcaps, fenders, and radiator caps. There was a private apartment and office on the top of the building for the founder of the Chrysler Corporation. They say he liked to brag he had the highest toilet in Manhattan. I'm sure he was flush with pride. The Capitol Records Building in Los Angeles has been sending secret messages since it opened, and you need to know Morse code to understand them. That secret message is Hollywood. The light has been sending the same message since the opening in 1956, but it has changed a couple of times. In 1992, to celebrate Capitol Records' 50th anniversary, it flashed Capitol 50. Then, before Katy Perry's album release in 2013, the message was also changed, but hardly anyone noticed the difference. One more fun fact about the building, it was the first circular office building in the world. Producer Samuel Lionel Roxy Rothafel designed a hidden apartment for himself in the Radio City Music Hall in New York City. He chose for the apartment, now called the Roxy Suite, to be decorated in the Art Deco style. It has 20-foot-high ceilings covered in gold leaf and walls with floor-to-ceiling plush drapes. Some of the most famous guests of the apartment were Judy Garland, Walt Disney, and Samuel Goldwyn. Today, it only opens for special occasions and looks exactly the same as it did in 1936. You might be able to rent it out for a private event, but they say the prices are very high. Grand Central Station in New York has a great hidden activity for travelers. There are tennis courts in a secret space named the Annex. This area used to be a recording studio. Now the location is known as the Vanderbilt Tennis Club, and you can visit it and play tennis there. The U.S. Supreme Court building in Washington, D.C. has a secret sports facility where clerks, off-duty police officers, and other Supreme Court employees can play basketball. This court, the basketball court, is located on the top 5th floor of the building and goes under the nickname the highest court in the land. There's a fun sign next to it saying, "Playing basketball and weightlifting are prohibited while the court is in session." Well, we wouldn't want to tempt the justices to, drop everything they're doing to play a game of horse, but I think that would be fun. Phoenix. This sizzling gem in the Sonoran Desert isn't just another American city. It's more like a giant oven where you can throw a party, as long as you don't forget the ice. Seriously, if you find yourself here in the summer, brace yourself for some serious heat. We're talking about temperatures that regularly pass 100 degrees. And in 2024, Phoenix hit 110 degrees 55 times during the summer, tying the record set just the year before. Now, I get it if you're not a fan of hot weather, but apparently a lot of people love living in a sauna. Phoenix ranks as the 5th largest city in the United States, and it is the capital and most populous city in Arizona, with 1.7 million residents as of 2024. And if we're talking about the metropolitan area, also known as the Valley of the Sun, the population is almost 5 million. Yet, good luck finding someone actually born here. Out of every 4 Phoenix residents, 3 were born somewhere else. Believe it or not, Phoenix wasn't always this bustling, crowded place. It became one. A few decades ago, it was just a sleepy little dot on the map. Back in the 1940s, the population was around 65,000. It wasn't even close to cracking the top 100 list of the largest U.S. cities. Now, at that time, Phoenix was mostly an agricultural hub, and its economy revolved around what they called the 5 C's: cotton, citrus, cattle, climate, and copper. But things really started to change in the 1950s thanks to one life-changing invention. Drumroll please? The air conditioner. Actually, it was the portable version that came out in 1945, created by an American inventor named Robert Sherman. Phoenix residents owe a lot to Robert for making life bearable during scorching summers. Before AC, people in Phoenix would literally move their beds outside and build sleeping porches. They'd protect that kind of outdoorsy space with light curtains or some kind of net to keep the dust and bugs out. Fun. Anyway, the point is that the air conditioner played a big part in making Phoenix an easier place to live. Since the 1940s, this city in Arizona has transformed from a dusty little town into a sprawling urban jungle, and it's still one of the top 10 fastest-growing metro areas in the U.S. The best part is, it looks like that won't change anytime soon, since this 519-square-mile metropolis is surrounded by rolling desert, with plenty of room to keep growing as far as the eye can see. So, who's dropping everything to move to Phoenix? Well, Californians are the city's biggest fans. According to a recent survey, a third of all new renters moving to Phoenix come from Los Angeles. Okay, that survey might not be the most reliable since it only applies to the source's clients, but it does line up with U.S. Census Bureau data from 2019, which says that 70,000 Californians moved to Arizona in the previous year. The connection between Phoenix and LA is so strong that some people even call Phoenix the next LA. You've got to give Phoenix credit for capitalizing on its proximity to Southern California. The city offers lower taxes, fewer regulations, and lower costs of living, which makes it a magnet for businesses, especially in high-tech and service industries. So, in the 90s, Phoenix was considered a non-stop generator of jobs. In the last few years, we've seen the number of jobs only go up, and the unemployment rate has dropped by nearly half, going from 6.3 in January 2014 to 3.4 in the same month in 2024. Now, when it comes to big city problems, you can't avoid talking about traffic. But here's another reason why Phoenix is a dream city. It doesn't even come close to the traffic nightmares you find in places like LA. Estimates show that people in Los Angeles waste about 119 hours a year just sitting in traffic. But in Phoenix, it's more like 61 hours. Huge difference, huh? And let's not even start talking about the money people waste just sitting in traffic. In LA, drivers burn through about $2,440 worth of gas per year. In Phoenix, they waste 25 gallons of fuel, which ends up costing about $952. Yeah, that's still a lot of cash, but compared to LA, come on, that's a steal. Phoenix being okay in terms of traffic might have a lot to do with how the city was designed. Just take a look at a map of Phoenix. You'll notice it looks like someone took a ruler and drew perfectly straight lines for the roads. That's because the city was laid out in a grid system. This setup makes it so much easier to get around, especially compared to cities full of confusing twists, U-turns, and one-way streets. It just simplifies things, whether you're a local or a tourist. Plus, Phoenix has nice wide streets. Most cities have one major road and a bunch of narrow streets that just can't handle heavy traffic. But Phoenix has wide roads everywhere. So, when the freeways get jammed, you can just hop onto a parallel street and still get to work without stressing out too much. When you look at all the job opportunities and the relatively smooth traffic, it's no wonder people are willing to put up with the heat and move to Phoenix. But don't get it twisted, the heat is no joke. It is really, really hot and sunny out there. We're talking about 300 days of sunshine on average, or about 85% daylight hours per year. But once again, Phoenix has made the best of it. And all that constant sunshine has turned Phoenix into one of the top solar energy cities in the country. Now, you may be wondering, a city in the middle of the desert with barely any rain, do they actually have enough water? Well, they do. Phoenix has its water situation pretty well sorted out, thanks to multiple sources. I mean, they don't rely on rain alone, which is a good thing because, desert life. Most of their water comes from way up north and east of the valley, where snow melts off the mountains and flows into giant reservoirs, storing it up for those dry years. But most of Phoenix's water comes from the Salt River Project, which brings water through canals and pipelines from the Salt and Verde rivers. Then there is the Central Arizona Project, which transports water all the way from the Colorado River. They even get a bit of water from underground wells. And Phoenix doesn't want to waste a drop, so they're smart about recycling, reusing treated water to keep parks green, and even recharging their groundwater. Since Phoenix is all about sunny skies nearly every day of the year, it's normal that people can get a little moody when it actually rains. But here's the thing. Phoenix always gets a surprise up its sleeve, even when it comes to bad weather. When it rains in the deserts, locals get treated to this unique earthy smell. It's thanks to the creosote bush, a desert plant that releases an amazing fragrance when the rain hits it. People describe it as the smell of rain, and honestly, it's one of those fresh, clean scents that makes you forget you're in the desert for a second. And if you've never stopped to think about why Phoenix is called Phoenix, well, it's based on that famous legend of the bird that rises from the ashes. Now, after knowing all the special things about this city and its unique ability to turn challenges into advantages, we can say the name couldn't have been better chosen. You'd be surprised to find out the life-changing discoveries a person can make just by browsing Google Maps. Like this guy, who found a suspicious crater and might have made a major scientific discovery. In 2024, Canadian Joël Lupoint was planning a casual camping trip in his homeland. He opened Google Earth and zoomed in Quebec's Côte-Nord region. That's when he saw it, this unusual rounded structure. The measurement was impressive, 9.3 miles from one point to another, and there seemed to be a lake next to it. He was quick to print the screen and sent the image to a French geophysicist to see if he knew anything about it. Most times these images turn out to be nothing, or simply Google Earth watermarks. But he was surprised when he opened his email and saw the scientist's reply. The geophysicist said that, judging by the looks of the topography, Lapointe could have discovered a meteor impact area. Now, impact areas are really hard to identify. Since they've been around for millions of years, most of their shapes have been heavily changed by erosion. Scientists call these areas impact structures. They're usually circular or crater-like and are made up of deformed bedrock. It happens when a meteor falls into the surface of the Earth. Here's the thing. Since the crater has huge walls around it, these areas are usually mistaken for mountain ranges. That's what left the Canadian explorer confused. But the French geophysicist that analyzed the case gave him hope. That weird formation in Quebec had been classified as a type of volcanic formation. After Lapointe brought this subject back to the agenda, scientists had to dig a little deeper to find the truth. Until this recent discovery, scientists thought the area looked like that due to some volcanic formation. This is actually normal. since other things such as volcanism and sinkholes can be mistaken for impact craters. To verify, they asked for some samples of the site. This is a more reliable way to fact-check whether a meteor landed there or not. When the meteor hits the Earth, it brings different types of minerals from outer space. That's the wonderful thing about impact craters. They reveal a link between Earth and the outside universe. By now, scientists have cataloged most of the minerals that are native to our planet. When they're searching for an impact structure, they usually look for things such as teenite and chemisite, which can only be found in meteors. The biggest known impact crater in the world is the Vredefort crater, located in South Africa. This big thing was formed some 4 billion years ago. The asteroid that made it is estimated to have been one of the largest ever to strike planet Earth. When the researchers got the results of the site back in Canada, they did confirm that it contained zircon, a mineral that tends to show areas of impact. There's no way to guarantee that LaPointe really found an impact crater, but scientists are organizing a research mission over to the area just to make sure. If it turns out that it really is an impact crater, that's pretty huge news, since the last discovery was made in 2013. Another one of these mesmerizing discoveries came from a 15-year-old boy. William Goddery was also a Canadian, and for some reason loved looking for long-lost Mayan cities. Different from the previous story, William had an intention and a research methodology. He had studied many books on Mayan civilizations. He believed that Mayans built their cities in relation to the stars in the sky. So he opened a book and mapped all the cities that have already been unearthed. And that's when he noticed something important. There is an area in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico where archaeologists have unearthed 2 Mayan cities. But on the constellation map, there are 3 stars. He thought to himself, could this mean there is a lost city waiting to be discovered nearby? William Goddery is known to be a science genius and has even won an award for this constellation theory. When he noticed that a 3rd city was missing from the 23rd constellation he was examining, he began to search Google Earth for satellite pictures that could help him solve this mystery. Advances in satellite tech have shed new light on long-lost Mayan cities such as Tikal. Located in the heart of the Guatemalan jungle, Tikal is believed to have been the capital of the ancient Mayan Empire. He had hopes, so he reached out to a friend inside the Canadian Space Agency to verify what he had found. Since he had already won awards for his research, he had friends in high places, and that's when things got interesting. According to the images, there was a large square area on the border of Mexico and Belize that looked like the remains of a city. William took the images to a remote sensing expert. They studied the images thoroughly and concluded that the area could be housing 30 buildings and even a large pyramid. William named the new city discovered as Mouth of Fire. However, his theory was very much contested inside the archaeological community, and many Mayan experts worked to debunk William's findings. Experts say that constellation theories are too unscientific. Renowned anthropologists and astronomers said William's methodology was an act of creative imagination. Still, a 15-year-old teen almost found a long-lost Mayan city, which is pretty exciting if you ask me. What about these tiny dots that appeared on images of Google Earth? These strange spotted circles were found in the middle of the Algerian desert. A YouTuber browsing on Google Earth found these circles and discovered that people had been debating over their origin for years. He thought they were a glitch from satellite images. There are dozens of them, stretching for miles and miles in a straight line. They're far away from any town, road, or human activity, making it hard to understand if it was man-made or just a natural phenomenon. To settle this mystery, he interviewed the people who took Google Earth's pictures. He found out they were 100% true. The circles were there in real life. They appear in multiple pictures from multiple years. Now, at first, he guessed they were the result of oil activity. Algeria is a rich area for natural resources, so this made sense. To find out if the area is worth extracting, companies usually undertake seismic surveys. They're a way of analyzing the Earth's surface by sending shock waves into the ground. Depending on how these waves bounce back, you'll know what is located underground. there was another possibility. The Sahara is a very dry area of the planet. The average high temperatures in summer are over 104 degrees Fahrenheit. To survive there, people need to find ways of accessing water. So his second guess was that the circles were kind of ruin or leftover from ancient water wells. But when he talked to an expert, he found out they weren't ancient water wells. You can see some of these traditional constructions in other cities on Google Earth, and they look really different from the mysterious circles. He decided to travel over to Algeria to find out the truth. He drove 99 miles into the heart of the desert, and when he gets there, he sees it. A huge crater dug on the sand, surrounded by 12 smaller holes. It kind of looked like the ancestor of a modern clock. There, he found something he couldn't spot on Google Earth: thin metal wires. When the curious YouTuber and his teams started to dig in the sand, they found old dynamite and some sardine cans. Apparently, they were hiding the truth. The Sahara Circles, as they were famously called, were not the historical leftovers of seismic surveying. Back at the time when these circles were made, this technology didn't even exist, but they were sure related to oil exploration. The dynamite holes were an ancient method of oil searching, and the sardine cans? Well, they were left by the workers who were exploring the region. Another Google Earth mystery solved. There once was a kingdom where the ancient Egyptians traveled to buy gifts for pharaohs, sort of like an ancient shopping mall. This kingdom, named the Land of Punt, was rich in luxury goods, including gold, aromatic resins, blackwood, ebony, ivory, and exotic animals like leopards and baboons. All of these sound like great gift ideas to me. The Land of Punt was an especially important trading partner for Egypt for over 1,000 years. But if you plan to go there, the bad news is that it hasn't survived to these days, and nobody knows for sure exactly where Punt was located. We only know about it from records. The most famous of them were left on the walls of the temple of Queen Hatshepsut, who had sent an expedition to Punt. Scientists have been trying to find the exact location of this rich land for over 150 years. It could have been southeast of Egypt, in a coastal region south of it along the Red Sea, Gulf of Aden, and the Indian Ocean, or it could have covered the Horn of Africa and the area across the sea in southern Arabia. Now researchers were finally able to narrow down the possible locations thanks to a study of baboon mummies. Ancient Egyptians admired baboons and even thought they were related to the deity of the moon and wisdom. One species, the sacred baboon, was often shown in wall paintings, sitting with its tail curled to the right, and was mummified in this position. Another type, the olive baboon, was wrapped up in one giant cocoon. Both types were found in the tombs of the Valley of the Kings. But if you remember geography lessons, baboons just don't wander around Egypt, so they must have been brought there through trade with other regions. Primatologists, Egyptologists, geographers, and geochemists look at the mummified baboons from two different time periods in ancient Egypt. Some were from the New Kingdom period, and others were from the Ptolemaic period. The scientists did some more hard work and analyzed tissues from 155 baboons from 75 separate places in eastern Africa and southern Arabia. Those were all areas that they thought could be the ancient Land of Punt. They measured oxygen and strontium in the baboons' bodies. When animals drink water and eat plants, their teeth, hair, and bones show a geographic signature of where they've lived, thanks to these elements they contain. Scientists use a special method called isotopic mapping, and found out that the New Kingdom baboons they analyzed came from a location in Eritrea, Ethiopia, or Somalia. 5 mummified baboons from the Ptolemaic period had strontium levels that matched those found in Egypt. So ancient Egyptians might have had a special place to breed and keep baboons, probably in Memphis, a city in Lower Egypt, not Tennessee. Meanwhile, paleontologists from New Zealand got lucky, as some boulders had split open from the tide and revealed fossils of the largest penguin that has ever lived on Earth. The scientists used laser scanners to make 3D models of the ancient penguin bones. They compared these bones to the flipper size of modern penguins and did some math as to how much the old penguins might have weighed. Today, the biggest penguins, emperor penguins, weigh between 55 to 100 pounds. Researchers think that the penguins from the past that they found weighed around 340 pounds, real giants in the penguin world. These huge flightless birds lived in the oceans around New Zealand more than 50 million years ago, after the dinosaurs went extinct. They totally took advantage of their big bodies to stay warm in the cold water. They might have even traveled the world thanks to it. And they'd scare off any predators, but they didn't have any. The asteroid that took down the dinosaurs also got rid of most big marine reptiles, and the ancestors of seals and whales were still living on land. Back in 1992, 4 farmers in China were draining water from their ponds and accidentally bumped into a ship full of gold and ancient statues worth millions. Just kidding, they actually found the Longgu Caves. Those are 24 big caves created by people a long time ago. Even though they are so large and well-made, no one knows who built them, why they were built, or how they were built. Experts think the caves are at least 2,000 years old, but they don't understand why these caves aren't mentioned in any historical records. All of the Longyu caverns look the same and aren't connected to each other. Each cave has one entrance connected to a vertical shaft with a carved staircase. Rain and water from the surface can flow into the caves through these stairs. To manage this water, the caves have special grooves, channels, and a system to catch the water at the bottom. So it looks like the ancient builders were real pros when it came to drainage and water management. Maybe my town could learn a lesson from them, as it turns into Venice after every heavy shower. Anyway, the caverns were built below a hill, named after a bird that is one of the most respected creatures in Chinese mythology and culture. It symbolizes all the best things, like high virtue, grace, and the union of yin and yang. Scientists think there could be a connection between the caverns and the bird, but it's just a theory so far. Experts from the National Institute of Ocean Technology in India were doing their routine pollution surveys when they found some structures that looked like a city underwater. Using special sonar technology, the team found big geometric shapes on the ocean floor. They brought up different items from the site, like pottery, beads, sculptures, parts of walls, and even human bones and teeth. They thought the ruins belonged to a civilization older than the Bronze Age Indus Valley Civilization, which is the earliest urban culture of the Indian subcontinent that we know of so far. But not everyone joined in on celebrating this awesome discovery. Some archaeologists refused to believe it and thought it could be some computer tricks. And even when they saw hundreds of artifacts from the ocean floor, they said an ancient river could have brought them there from someplace else. The team that discovered the underwater site decided to prove they were right. They chose a piece of wood as their main evidence. They tested it and found it was 9,500 years old. That could be the age of the entire site. Skeptics still insist that we can't rewrite all human history because of one piece of wood. Even 23 years since the discovery, no one is sure about the final answer. This is partly because it's hard to explore the site. It's in extremely dangerous waters with strong currents and riptides. During the cool Antarctica summer, from late November through January, geologists from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee climbed the frozen slopes of the McIntyre Promontory in the Transantarctic Mountains. High above the ice fields, they looked through the mountain's gray rocks for fossils from when the continent had green forests. By the end of their trip, the geologists found fossil pieces from 13 trees. These fossils show that the trees are over 260 million years old. This means the forest grew at the end of the Permian period before the first dinosaurs even appeared. More than 90% of all species on Earth disappeared back then, including the polar forests. These trees would have been very tough if they grew in Antarctica and could have survived. But a huge increase in gases like carbon dioxide and methane must have taken them down. This Antarctic forest is a terrific way for us to see what life was like before the extinction, and we might even understand what caused it. It also shows us how plants were different back then from those we are used to now.
Big news! Santa is real, and he looks like this. I know it's not exactly how we pictured the jolly old guy, but a recently discovered tomb might just be the proof we've been waiting for to show that St. Nicholas was real and Turkish. Turns out, he wasn't a North Pole native, but a kind-hearted bishop from the 4th century. famous for giving gifts to everyone. The legend says he was a wealthy man born in the ancient city of Patara, modern-day Turkey, who traveled to the countryside to help the poor and the sick. For centuries, though, people couldn't be sure he actually existed. Some historical sources say he was buried in Myra, which is now called Demre, Turkey. Since the 80s, archaeologists have been digging around this area, trying to prove it. And now, their Christmas miracle has finally come true. After digging 6 feet deep in an annex of St. Nicholas's Church, they uncovered a mysterious limestone tomb, about 2 meters long. While they're pretty sure this is St. Nick's final resting place, they're still searching for an inscription to confirm its exact age. Now, if we're talking about the fictional Santa Claus, legend says his home is in Lapland, Finland. Back in 2018, archaeologists made an interesting discovery that could finally prove that Santa was real. They were digging at a site called Tiny Aro when they stumbled upon about 200 burial pits. But when they looked inside, there was definitely no sign of Santa. Actually, there were no human skeletons at all, just a bunch of things like pottery and animal bones. So no one really knows what this place was. That was the complete opposite of what happened with a group of archaeologists working in the ancient city of Petra, Jordan. Since 2003, there have been rumors about hidden chambers beneath the famous monument called Al-Khazneh, also known as the Treasury. 21 years later, a team finally decided to dig and uncovered an intact tomb. Inside, they found at least 12 human skeletons and artifacts, estimated to be over 2,000 years old. Hundreds of thousands of tourists travel to Al-Khazneh every year, and most of them probably go there to see the site of the Holy Grail in the movie Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So, do you want to know the funny part? One of the skeletons in the tomb was clutching a ceramic chalice that looked a lot like the Holy Grail. You probably remember the devastating fire that caused massive damage to Notre Dame in Paris back in 2019. Because of that, the building, originally built between the 12th and 13th centuries, had to be restructured. But archaeologists saw it as a golden opportunity to dig into the site and uncover its hidden secrets. The team was only allowed to dig about 16 inches beneath the floor, but that was enough. As soon as they removed the floor tiles and cleared away a thin layer of dirt, they spotted the top of a lead coffin. Then, they found some limestone sculptures, including life-sized heads and torsos. Altogether, they uncovered over 1,000 fragments of different works of art. Ancient statues have been found in the most random places, including a sewer. In July 2024, Bulgarian archaeologists were checking a Roman sewer in the ancient city of Heraclea Sintica when they found a nearly 7-foot-tall marble statue of Hermes, the Greek messenger deity. This town was completely devastated and abandoned after 2 earthquakes, one in the year 388 and the other in the year 425. But somehow, it didn't destroy this statue. In fact, its head was found in surprisingly good condition. Finding ancient artwork is definitely fascinating, but imagine stumbling upon an entire hidden city in the Amazon rainforest. Using high-tech lasers, researchers uncovered a lost civilization with thousands of structures and a whole network of roads, canals, and houses, all buried beneath the dense jungle. This city was built around 2,500 years ago, in an area located in the shadow of a volcano, which, by the way, could have erupted and destroyed this civilization at some point. It's hard to say exactly how many people live there, but experts estimate they stayed up there for about 1,000 years. This discovery proves ancient people also had huge organized cities in the middle of the Amazon. A similar thing happened in Campeche in southern Mexico. An archaeologist was doing some research on the internet when he accidentally discovered a hidden Maya city. This area, now called Valeriana, was huge, about the size of Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland. It had pyramids, sports fields, amphitheaters, and paths connecting different districts. Thanks to satellite images, archaeologists uncovered an entire unknown civilization from the Bronze Age. They were checking out aerial images when they discovered 100 prehistoric settlements in the Pannonian Plain, a region that includes parts of what's now Serbia and Hungary. The people who lived there are now known as the Titsa site group, and it looks like they were a pretty well-organized society, skilled at growing food, hunting, and fishing. Google Earth helped a team to uncover a mysterious set of 400 ancient gates in Saudi Arabia. These gates, scattered across the desert, are thought to be from thousands of years ago. They're made of stone and arranged in weird formations that have left archaeologists scratching their heads. I mean, they don't look like they were meant for funerals, and they don't seem like structures where people lived. So, we still have no idea what they are. Technology is really changing archaeology. Thanks to artificial intelligence and, well, a $1 million prize, we've finally been able to decipher part of an unreadable and super damaged ancient scroll. The Herculaneum scrolls were discovered by workers digging up the ancient town of Herculaneum near Pompeii in 1752. But their condition was so bad that, for years, they were considered indecipherable. Thankfully, AI has helped unveil their secrets. Based on the studies so far, experts believe that one of these scrolls was written by a philosopher who valued pleasures, like music and food, above all else. No doubt, Stonehenge in England is one of the most mysterious places on Earth. Some theories even suggest it was built by extraterrestrials. After more than a century of research, archaeologists are still figuring out how it came together. See that big altar in the middle? Turns out it came all the way from Scotland. And that's pretty wild, considering this massive sandstone block weighs over 6 tons, and the people who built Stonehenge more than 4,000 years ago didn't have the luxury of wheels or modern tools. We can find some pretty amazing stuff in the oceans too. In 2013, a mysterious shipwreck was found about 20 feet underwater off the coast of Kenya. At the time, no one knew where it came from, but now, researchers are pretty sure this could be a ship from Vasco da Gama's fleet. You know, the famous Portuguese navigator, best known for being the first to sail from Europe to India by rounding Africa's Cape of Good Hope. If it's confirmed, this shipwreck could be one of the earliest European shipwrecks in the Indian Ocean. Ancient treasures can take many forms, including a bottle. Recently, archaeologists in Norway uncovered a 150-year-old message in a bottle during an excavation of a Viking burial mound. The bottle contained a letter written by Anders Lorange, an archaeologist who worked on the site back in the 1800s, along with his business card and a few coins wrapped in paper. The letter gave some details about the excavation, though it seems Lorange got a few things wrong, like the exact number of Viking shields discovered. At the end of the letter, he wrote a personal note in runic script, "Emma Gade, my girlfriend." So it gave us not only insights into history, but also a peek into his love life.
Experts found the oldest lakeside village ever discovered in Europe underneath the waters of Lake Ohrid in Albania. The lake itself is ancient too. It's said to be one of the oldest lakes in the world. Before this discovery, a village in the Italian Alps held the record. It was about 7,000 years old. But radiocarbon dating shows that the village under Lake Ohrid was built between 6,000 and 5,080 BCE, which means it's around 1,000 years older than any other village in Europe. Around 200 to 500 people lived in this village. It goes back to the time of the Neolithic period. In fact, these people were likely one of the first ever communities that decided to settle down. This discovery wouldn't be so interesting if it didn't have an enigma. Villagers made a wooden fortress of spikes all around their village to stay safe. But safe from what? Something mysterious. These locals went through all the trouble of building their homes on stilts over the lake and surrounding it with spikes for defense. Why did they make things so complex? That's what archaeologists are trying to figure out. Are there any other unusual settlements? Sure thing. For example, Göbekli Tepe. This place takes us back to the very beginning of permanent settlements. It also makes us question everything we thought we knew about how organized societies started. It seems like the fellas who lived there were into something pretty special. like rituals or hanging out together as a community. Around 11,000 years ago, ancient humans carved huge blocks of limestone and somehow managed to drag them to the other side of the mound. These blocks were like canvases painted with images of animals and people. They were placed in circles. Underneath these stones, you'll find the same massive pillars as the ones from the other side of the mound. Around 250 of these pillars hang out on the surface, and researchers also found around 60 of them during the dig. These are like messages from the past, telling us about people who once lived here and the stuff they were up to. These findings challenge traditional timelines and interpretations of early human society. While Göbekli Tepe has gained popularity among tourists, there's another site nearby, Karahan Tepe. It remains lesser known, but equally significant. Both sites challenge the belief that animal farming led to settled life. In fact, it appears people became sedentary first, and then they started animal domestication. They also question the traditional idea that organized societies followed the development of agriculture. These ancient sites suggest that organized communities existed before agriculture, possibly with cultic or communal rituals. These structures suggest complex, multi-purpose functions rather than just religious ones. People gathered in these places for discussion and storytelling, fostering a collective identity. These buildings might mark the beginnings of a cohesive community, showing the emergence of horizontal hierarchies and knowledge sharing. Let's move to the other side of the world. Mexico's 1,500-year-old unknown pyramids are worth talking about. These pyramids have stood strong for all these centuries, all thanks to a secret ingredient from the prickly pear cactus. With its help, indigenous builders crafted these ancient marvels. Gray volcanic rock pyramids rise like a mini mountain range. As we get closer, it becomes clear that skilled hands etched identical steps into the hard rock, forming a staircase of the largest pyramid. The two smaller pyramids, called the House of the Wind and the House of the Longest Night, share the same human touch. Legend has it that these structures hid treasures. But it wasn't until Mexican archaeologists started digging there in the early 2000s that the secrets began to unravel. The House of the 13 Heavens was built around 540 BCE to keep track of time. After all, it wasn't so easy for ancient people to keep track of dates in the days before clocks and calendars. Instead, they looked at the skies and celestial objects. Think of the pyramid as their own cosmic calendar. Its corners matched up with solstices and important dates for planting and harvesting. When you stand on the steps these days, the sun lines up perfectly with the corresponding corner. But these pyramids aren't just about telling time. Quiroz and Zepeda, archaeologists on a mission, are trying to piece together the clues. They've recovered a few artifacts, and that's how they've learned that the ancient builders used the sticky substance from prickly pear cactus leaves to hold their creations together. This ancient technique is still used by some indigenous people today. One surprise after another. The House of the 13 Heavens reveals a skeleton older than the pyramid itself, nearly a millennium older. This means that people carried this body with them for 950 years. It's another mystery. The next stop is Duna de Bologna. It's a Spanish sand dune hiding Roman ruins. This sand pile is near the edge of Europe, reaching out toward North Africa. It's more than 98 feet tall and 656 feet wide. As the winds move and the dune shifts, it reveals pieces of history hidden deep within it. Climate change boosts those winds, moving the dune even more. As it migrates, it shows us traces of people who used to live here. Archaeologists have been busy digging around, and they found ancient tombs. Imagine exploring a sandy maze and stumbling upon these tombs filled with history. The sand has acted as a protector, preserving bones, jewelry, and arrowheads. But that's not all. Nearby, there's an archaeological site from the 2nd century BCE. That's when the Romans were hanging out here. They had a whole city down there, complete with baths, a theater, and a temple. And it was built on top of an older Phoenician settlement. An earthquake shook things up a long time ago, and people left the city. For centuries, it lay hidden under the sand. Modern historians and archaeologists are excited about what else this shifting landscape will reveal. Fingers crossed that this sandy time capsule stays safe and keeps sharing its stories with generations to come. In Peru, archaeologists are exploring the 3,000-year-old Condor's Passageway. A what? Okay, so archaeologists were digging around a place called Chavan de Huantar, where the Chavan people lived. This place is around 190 miles away from Lima, Peru's capital. So, the Chavan people were advanced artists. They loved drawing birds and wild cats in their paintings, and they went way back, even before the Inca Empire became a big deal. They were some of the first societies that settled down and started farming in Peru's highlands of the Andes Mountains. That's more than 2,000 years before the Incas showed up. Archaeologists found a secret passage in one of the temple buildings. They called it the Condor's Passageway. It was a hidden hallway that had been locked away for ages. Lara Croft would love it there. This passage leads to other rooms inside the temple. It gives us a peek into what life was like then. Inside this hidden hallway, the researchers found some neat stuff. Like a big piece of pottery weighing as much as a big bag of potatoes and decorated with a drawing of a condor's head and wings. The condor, by the way, is a power symbol for the ancient Andeans. Archaeologists also found some pottery. All of this stuff was discovered in May 2022 when the entrance to the hidden passage was finally opened. Pretty new. The temple complex where they found these ancient items has other structures, like terraces. And there's still more to uncover. The tricky thing is going forward in these hidden passages. The archaeologists had to send in cameras mounted on robots to explore them first. They didn't want to risk messing up the ancient building or, getting stuck in there. Let's wait and see what else they'll uncover.
Strange and amazing items are discovered often, but figuring out what our ancestors were up to is pretty tough. Especially when all you have are just some rusty cups and cave drawings. It's no surprise that even the experts in lab coats sometimes make mistakes. But it's not just about dusty plates and huge stones. Sometimes there's even humans with large heads. So grab your digging tools and let's travel back to ancient times to explore incredible societies that even scientists can't fully explain. Sardinia may look idyllic now, but I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't fancy visiting it 3,000 years ago. Rumor has it, terrible giants roamed around this island back then. People even talk about finding human skeletons over 13 feet tall there, although nobody's ever shown anything to prove it. But the stories will make you wonder because some weird stuff has definitely happened. In 1974, over 5,000 pieces of broken stone artifacts were found in a part of the island called Monte Prama, but instead of being displayed in a museum, they were locked up in an underground vault for about 30 years. Sounds a bit suspicious, doesn't it? When they were finally displaced in 2005, scientists put the pieces together to find statues of 38 giant men standing 8 feet tall. Not quite as tall as the legendary skeletons, but still pretty huge. It's thought these statues were made by the Nuragic people, who lived on the island a long time ago. Besides giant statues, they also built over 8,000 massive stone buildings. Perhaps Nuragic weren't giants themselves, but they definitely liked their things big. I do too. I like a big number of likes on our videos. That would be pretty great. Thank you if you liked this and subscribed. Now back to the video. You and I are pretty smart, but we might not be the smartest humans ever. Actually, we might not even be the smartest species. Since 1913, some skull fossils found in South Africa have hinted at a possibly smarter contender called Boskop man. This human-like species might have lived as recently as 10,000 years ago. Their skull suggests they had really big heads, which means their brains could have been 30% bigger than ours. Wow! Their average IQ could have been around 149, making them among the smartest 0.05% of people today. But if a Boskop brainiac was so much smarter, why are they not around and we are? Well, bigger isn't always better, you know. Our brains are a lot bigger than our ape relatives, mainly in the prefrontal cortex. This part helps with high-level tasks like making decisions, remembering things short-term, and being aware of ourselves. The parts of the brain that handle our senses and movements haven't really grown much. So, maybe the Boskops spent too much time dwelling on the past rather than doing practical things like hunting. But this is all just guessing. We really don't know what happened to these clever cousins of ours. Some people even argue that Boskops weren't any different from us, with the only evidence being parts of skulls. The jungle is huge. Did you know the Amazon rainforest is home to about 30% of all the world's plant and animal species? That's impressive. However, the history of one native species, humans, has long puzzled scientists. The mysterious Kasarabe people lived here for hundreds of years and then vanished around 1400 AD. People thought the Amazon only had a few scattered tribes, but recently we discovered big, unusual shapes in the ground called geoglyphs. These might look like simple shallow ditches, but they're actually the remains of a vast civilization that spread over 5,000 square miles and includes about 450 markings, some as wide as 1,300 feet. That's insane! They likely contained ceremonial buildings and could have hosted up to 1 million people as recently as 550 years ago. Thanks to new technology like LiDAR, which uses a safe laser to map the forest without harming it, we can explore deeper. In 2019, some scans showed miles of raised roads and pathways and even pyramids over 70 feet tall. They found 26 separate settlements, 2 of which were at least 250 acres each. Damn, that's like 330 soccer fields. It's not certain what happened to the Kasarabe people. Maybe European conquistadors drove them out. Maybe the most baffling ancient civilization is one we've never actually found a trace of. Yep, I'm talking about Atlantis, the grand city that supposedly sank into the ocean. The first mentions of Atlantis come from the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who talked about a great city near the Strait of Gibraltar. But for ages, everyone just thought Plato made up Atlantis as a perfect version of his own Athens. So why, about 12,000 years after it supposedly vanished, do we still wonder if it might be real? Well, in the 19th century, U.S. Congressman Ignatius Donnelly wrote a book giving 13 reasons why he thought Atlantis was more than just a myth. Then, in 1965, some folks thought they actually found Atlantis when they discovered the Richat structure, a massive 25-mile-wide dome in Mauritania, Africa. It's so big that you can see the whole thing from space. 2 astronauts flying over the Sahara Desert spotted this giant eye staring back at them and thought they'd made the discovery of a lifetime. Unfortunately, there's no solid evidence linking this structure to Atlantis. It's believed to have formed from volcanic activity about 100 million years ago. But it does look suspicious, doesn't it? Still, we're no closer to knowing the truth. Imagine going back to about 3,300 BCE and finding yourself in South Asia. Welcome to the Harappan civilization. These people were way ahead of their time. They had cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, complete with baked brick houses, sophisticated drainage systems, and even public baths. This place might have had over 5 million people, making it one of the densest regions at the time. They also invented a system of standardized weights that was incredibly useful for traders. And trading they did. These people had connections stretching all the way to the Middle East, thanks to their great skills in metallurgy. They even had a form of ancient branding. The seals were used to stamp clay on tray goods. Despite being so advanced with a thriving urban life, there's a whole bunch of mystery shrouding their language and script. We've got bits and pieces of their writing, but no one's deciphered them yet, even with all the technology we have today. We also still don't know how exactly their society worked. It looks like they didn't flaunt their social status as much as other civilizations. No grand palaces or massive monuments. Instead, their largest buildings might have been granaries. They sure were practical. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. Around 1800 BCE, this bustling civilization started to decline, possibly due to shifts in river patterns. As the environment changed, the Harappans packed up, moving towards more hospitable lands. Ever heard of the Minotaur? The beast with a bull's head and a man's body, hunting the bravest travelers in a massive maze. Well, this wasn't just any old tale. It was one of the most popular dramas of the ancient world, and it was inspired by this place, the island of Crete. The Minoans lived here during the Bronze Age. They had stunning palaces, amazing frescoes, and a culture so rich it still fascinates historians to this day. They built places like Knossos, which was so complex with its multi-story buildings and elaborate hallways that it might have inspired the whole labyrinth myth. Their engineering was so ahead of its time that even their drainage systems were more advanced than what many of us have today. Let me know in the comments which of these stories you find the most fascinating, and thanks for watching.
If you come across a well in Portugal, resist the temptation to gaze into its depths. The inverted tower in the enigmatic city of Sintra sends chills through those who encounter it as it spirals down a daunting 88 feet into the underground. It certainly wasn't designed to collect water, yet its true purpose remains a closely guarded secret. Dating back to around 1904, this well could have been involved in a mysterious initiation tradition from the Knights Templar. The Templars had faded into history almost 6 centuries before the construction of this pit, but their enigmatic traditions were revived by later generations. So one theory says that candidates seeking to join the group back then had to confront their deepest fears by facing this well, descending its spiral staircase blindfolded. When they reached the bottom of the inverted tower, they removed their blindfolds and were faced with this frightening sight. The only way out of this dark labyrinth was to keep looking up and following the light. Now imagine yourself browsing the shelves of a used bookstore until you find a book with an alphabet you've never seen before. You decide to use an image translation app but find no matches. Intrigued, you buy the book. Then you show it to your friends and family, but nobody recognizes that alphabet. Rare book dealer Winfried Vonnig probably experienced the same frustration back in 1912 when he acquired what would later become the most enigmatic book in the world. The work is known today as the Voynich manuscript, and it's written entirely in an unknown language that no one has deciphered yet. The pages of this 15th century codex are filled with botanical drawings, but these aren't typical daisies or roses. In fact, they don't resemble any plant species that we know of. What makes things even stranger is the illustrations of unfamiliar constellations and women swimming in green baths. Delving deeper into the realm of mysterious texts, we set off on a journey to the Qumran Caves near the Salt Sea in the Middle East. In 1952, a team of archaeologists stumbled upon 2 scrolls made of highly oxidized copper at the site. Unrolling them was a major challenge, so they decided to cut the scrolls into 23 parts to investigate them. Imagine their surprise to see Hebrew words like gold and silver popping up. But no, it wasn't an ancient invoice. It was more like a treasure map, pointing the way to over $1 million. Unfortunately, the treasure was never found. Not for lack of trying, though. You see, the quest isn't as easy as it may appear. Some of the copper scroll's vocabulary is technical, and some geographical locations remain a mystery. There's also one last possibility. Perhaps it's all a work of fiction, like a pirate tale from the old days. People talk about Mona Lisa's almost haunting stare that seems to follow you no matter where you stand. But here's a quick question. Does she have eyebrows? You got it right if you said no, and her complete lack of eyebrows adds another layer of mystique to her gaze. The most common explanation is that beauty standards were different, and perhaps plucking the hairs above the eyes was a thing around 1503. But take a look at other Italian paintings from that time, like La Schiavona or Portrait of a Young Girl. Yep, eyebrows. So, not everyone was entirely pleased with this theory, like French inventor Pascal Cotte. He spent 3,000 hours analyzing scans of the painting to dig through all the layers of Leonardo da Vinci's masterpiece. Now he claims that the Mona Lisa once had eyebrows, but they disappeared over time due to cleanings and restorations. Some historians, however, still question his findings, which means that Mona Lisa's style, or lack of it, remains an unsolved mystery. So, you decide to travel to Rio de Janeiro, and everyone tells you that Sugarloaf Mountain is a must-see. When you spot the mountain from a distance, you realize that the stone has a cavity. But around noon, the whole view changes. The shadow in that cavity takes the shape of a bird, an ibis to be precise. A local legend links this bird shape to the ancient Egyptian deity Thoth, as if the ancient Egyptians once visited Rio de Janeiro and were somehow inspired by the natural phenomenon. But it's probably just a big coincidence. I mean, literally. The real mystery, however, lies in the waters around Sugarloaf Mountain. In the 80s, archaeologist Robert Marks got a tip from locals about a treasure hidden beneath Guanabara Bay. He dove in and found quite a few Roman amphorae. You know, those ancient vases with two handles? His discovery could potentially provide evidence of a Roman shipwreck that might have reached Brazil 17 centuries before the Portuguese even set foot there. However, he couldn't proceed with his research, and to this day, the idea of the Roman presence on Brazil's coast remains uncertain. The true location of Cleopatra's tomb isn't the only ancient Egyptian mystery. Many secrets are carved into the walls of ancient structures, like in the Temple of Seti I. Take a close look at this hieroglyph, and you'll notice that it resembles a modern-day helicopter. Look to the right, and you'll see an engraving that looks like a submarine. Odd, right? The most reasonable explanation for this has to do with the legacies of different rulers. When a new pharaoh came to power, they had their own hieroglyphs added over the original ones. But this is still a topic of debate, as some Egyptologists believe that these mysterious hieroglyphs may represent some kind of ancient technology. The same applies to the Dendera light. The image found in the underground passageway of the Hathor Temple is a subject of significant controversy in Egyptian history. Some researchers suggest that the inscription simply represents a rising sun, while others interpret it as evidence of some kind of modern lighting system. And it does indeed resemble Crookes' tube, one of the early experiments with electrical discharges. Although there's no concrete evidence of ancient Egyptians having modern electricity, some historians believe that this theory could help explain why many discovered tombs don't have any residues left behind from the use of oil lamps or candles. A lot has been said about the mysterious pyramids of Egypt, but many people tend to forget that other inexplicable structures had already existed even before them. Our next stop takes us to Turkey. The top of a hill known as Göbekli Tepe, near the city of Urfa, holds an ancient secret. It features more than 20 circular stone enclosures dated back over 11,000 years. Many of these have heavily carved stone T-shaped pillars adorned with eerie human figures with folded hands. The most accepted theory is that it's the world's first temple, likely used for rituals or social events. But the greatest mystery lies in how it was built, as this site existed before the domestication of animals or the use of metal tools. So the construction must have been very difficult, challenging our understanding of the historical timeline. Now, I hope you're not afraid of heights, because we're about to take a flight over the Nazca Lines. You've probably already heard about these massive, mysterious drawings etched into an arid region of Peru. They come in many different shapes, like a spider, a monkey, and even a Google-eyed ET, that is probably just a fissure. Anyway, this story got some fresh chapters in 2022 when an additional 168 new drawings were discovered. The original ones could only be seen from the air, but these new ones are much smaller and can be observed from the ground. However, one thing they have in common is that their purpose remains totally unclear. Some might call them the largest-scale calendar in the world. Others suggest that they served as a tool for agricultural purposes. Of course, many theories have emerged in an attempt to give the Nazca Lines a meaning, but the truth is that they remain some of the most important unsolved mysteries in history.